Top Gear drifted around 36 consecutive corners and onto your Super NES back in 1992. Developed by Gremlin Graphics and published by Kemco, Top Gear was one of the very first racing games to hit the Super NES back when it was originally released. And no, before you even start to ask, this game has nothing to do with the television show of the same name. Hell, Top Gear the TV show didn't even exist at the time. Top Gear the game, though, is essentially in the same style of popular arcade racers at the time, like Outrun, and it's all about super fast speeds with very little braking involved. So does Top Gear succeed in bringing home the excitement of arcade racing games to the Super NES, or is it stuck in second gear with no hope of finishing? Well, strap into your favorite off-brand sports car, because we're about to see if Top Gear can make it to the pole position. Start up Top Gear and you get a fairly large amount of options to play with before you ever even get into a race. Things like choosing your driver's name, manual or automatic transmissions, and even several different control setups that barely make any sense. Like this one, who's really playing with their controller upside down? You of course also get the option of selecting your car, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. Generally they all have a give and take with performance and speed, though Top Gear also includes their overall fuel consumption during a race as well, which we'll get into here in a bit. So choose whichever car fits your driving style best, and then get ready to burn some pixelated rubber tires. Once out on the track, the first thing you'll probably notice is the weird screen setup. No, you didn't accidentally pick the two-player option. That screen's always there regardless of what you choose. It may be a bit distracting at first, but you eventually learn to ignore it, and fortunately doesn't ever cover up anything that a full screen view would have shown more of. Other than that, Top Gear is your standard arcade racing game, complete with tons of cars to pass, obstacles scattered all over the track, and a complete lack of anything approaching a simulation. As mentioned before, if you're using the brake, then you're doing it wrong. Top Gear requires no such advanced driving techniques here, and is generally fine with looking more like bumper cars than actual racing. Your main strategy is to go fast, and if that isn't working, then go faster using the limited number of turbo boosts you get before every race. Avoid and pass enough cars and you shouldn't have too much of a problem making it into the top 3 regularly. So if you're coming into Top Gear expecting things like braking lines and optimal car customization, then you better find another racing game to play. One area where Top Gear differs from its arcade brethren is in its race length. While Top Gear starts off fast and furious with some quick 3-lap races, it quickly changes gear and has you doing 6 and even 7-lap races that can take well over 5 minutes to finish. And it's not trying to be long just for the sake of extending the game either, since this is where the whole fuel consumption from the car select screen comes into play. Yes, Top Gear was one of the very first racing games to actually make you manage your fuel for longer races. If you see you're getting low, you can jam into any available pit stop to refuel. The cool thing about all this is just how much strategy is actually involved in refueling. Just like real racing, you can gamble on a low tank in hopes of getting to the finish without pitting. But if you're wrong, then you'll be stranded on the side of the track in last place. You can also leave the pit at any time during a pit stop, so you can either go in for a full tank if you've got the time, or speed off with a splash of fuel if you're in a hurry. It's really neat that this is even in the game at all, and adds a ton of strategy to what would otherwise be a super simple arcade racer. Now you would think with Top Gear being an early Super NES racer that it would have a ton of problems with it, right? Amazingly enough though, Gremlin Graphics have produced a near flawless game here. If you're worried about game length due to it being an arcade style racing game, then don't be. Top Gear has a substantial amount of tracks and locations to race in, and even has a good variety of stuff you'll see in them. Each location is filled with unique obstacles and roadways, which goes a long way in making those longer races more than just constant passing on a boring course you've already seen a dozen times. About the only bad thing I can say about the game is that it's just not as smooth as other racing games that came out after it, hurting the overall sense of speed. The scrolling isn't bad for the most part, but there are times when it can definitely drop down into choppy territory, making some of the faster courses feel like a slideshow at times. Besides that though, I've got no real complaints with the game at all. If you haven't guessed by now, I really like Top Gear. It's easily my favorite racing game on the Super NES. Yes, better games did eventually come out, but Top Gear has a certain fun simplicity to it that few racing games on the Super NES could ever duplicate. I was actually never even a fan of racing games at all until I played Top Gear. so that's gotta say something about just how much fun it is. And it's even better when you finally do get a second player to use on that bottom screen, since you can now team up to take down the rest of the pack together. And to top it off, Top Gear is still just as fun to play today as it was then. So if you're looking for a great Super NES racer, then Top Gear should be at the top of your list, and is, in my opinion, a first place finish when compared to every other racing game on the system.